They say a mother's love has no limits. I used to believe that too. I remember holding my son for the first time, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine like I was his whole world. I raised him alone. His father left when he was just a baby, and I swore I would be enough. Every scraped knee, every school play, every sleepless night, I was there. I didn't just love him. I lived for him. I thought we had a bond. He used to kiss my forehead and say, "You're my favorite person, Mom." But little by little, that warmth faded. The hugs stopped. The calls got shorter. Birthdays turned into voice messages. I told myself he was busy, building his life. I was proud, even if it hurt. Still, I kept cooking his favorite food when he visited. I kept the house the way he liked it. I even kept the little drawings he made as a child in a box by my bed. I thought he knew how much he meant to me. I thought love meant something. But then came the day he said we needed to talk. He didn't sit beside me. He stood, arms crossed, as if I was a problem to be solved. "You can't live alone anymore," he said. "It's not safe. I've already arranged everything." Arranged what? My life? My future? Without me? Before I could understand what was happening, my things were packed. My house, my home, was no longer mine. A car arrived, and I was taken to a place that smelled of bleach and forgotten souls. A place they called a home, but it felt like exile. The staff was kind, but their eyes were tired. The rooms were quiet, too quiet. I sat on the edge of a bed that wasn't mine, in clothes I hadn't chosen, asking myself, what did I do wrong? Was loving him not enough? I cried that night, not loud, just a soft weeping, like the sound of a heart folding in on itself. And in that silence, one question kept echoing. Did I raise a stranger? The days passed slowly, like a clock that had lost its will to tick. Breakfast, pills, silence, repeat. I watched the other residents, some with trembling hands, some with eyes that stared into the past. One woman kept asking for her daughter. She promised to visit, she whispered every morning. She never came. That broke me in ways I can't explain. We were like shadows of people we used to be, and I, who once filled a house with laughter and warm meals, had become just another forgotten old woman in a hallway. No more birthdays, no more calls. My son didn't visit. Not once. Not even a message. It was as if I had died, and he just hadn't bothered to bury me. Then came her, Clara, a young nurse with gentle hands and a voice that reminded me of springtime. She didn't treat me like I was broken. She asked questions. She listened. Sometimes she just sat with me in silence, and that was enough to keep my soul from crumbling completely. I told her about my son, about the house I loved, about the garden with my late mother's roses. She listened as if each word mattered, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I still existed. I tried calling him, just to hear his voice, just to ask, why? But he didn't answer. He never did. And that silence, it screamed louder than any insult. It told me everything. One afternoon, Clara brought me a cup of tea and sat beside me with a notebook. "You mentioned your house," she said. "Was it in your name?" I blinked. "Yes," I whispered. "I never signed it over." She nodded, eyes thoughtful. That was the first moment something stirred inside me. A seed. A thought. Because suddenly, I remembered something. They took me from my home, but forgot the home was still legally mine. I used to believe that no child could truly abandon the mother who raised them with love. I believed in bonds that time could not erase. I believed in my son. But what I discovered shattered every piece of that belief. It started on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of afternoon where the light filters through the blinds like tired hope. Clara walked into my room with a quiet face and a folder in her hand. She had helped me retrieve some documents from my old place, the ones my son had left behind when he rushed to arrange my future. I saw my name, bold, untouched, the house deed, still mine. My hands trembled as I held the papers. It was like holding a part of myself I had forgotten, a name on a page, a trace of dignity. "He never had the right," Clara said softly. He made it seem like you didn't matter, but this says otherwise. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, hearing echoes of my son's voice through the years, birthday songs, "I love you, Mom," empty promises. Then his cold tone in the kitchen, saying, "You don't belong in that house anymore." 2 weeks later, I got a call from a neighbor, an old friend who still lived on the same street. Her voice shook. "I saw your son, Anna. He's cleaning out the house, selling things. Told someone he's renting the place soon." I felt the air leave my body like it had been punched out of me. He was selling my life, my furniture, my memories. Without a second thought, I tried calling again. This time he answered. "Why are you selling the house?" I asked, my voice barely steady. He sighed loudly, like I was an annoyance. "You don't need it anymore, Mom. You're better off where you are. It's not like you can take care of yourself. I'm doing what's best for everyone." "Everyone?" I whispered. "You mean you?" He snapped. "You're ungrateful. After everything I've done for you, you should be thanking me. I could have left you. Worse off. As if being discarded, locked away, and forgotten was some kind of favor. As if my entire life of sacrifice could be erased with the slam of a phone. After that call, I stopped speaking for 2 days. Not a word. Not to Clara. Not to anyone. I just sat by the window, watching the leaves fall, feeling like each one was a part of me being stripped away. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was humiliated, betrayed, violated in a way that had no name. I remembered the night he had a fever at 7 years old. He cried in my arms for hours. I stayed up all night with a wet cloth and whispered prayers. I remembered the time he failed a math test and thought he was a failure. I held him close and told him he was brilliant, that one mistake didn't define him. I remembered how I worked 2 jobs, gave up everything just so he could have a decent life. And now? He spoke to me like I was garbage. That weekend, the priest from the chapel came for his usual visit. I didn't open my mouth. He prayed over me, but my faith felt far away. That night I sat in the dark and whispered, "God, if you're there, give me my voice back. Not to beg, not to scream, but to act." Clara noticed. She saw the fire returning to my eyes. She sat beside me and said something I'll never forget. "You don't need to fight him with anger. You just need to remember who you are." And so I did. I pulled out the deed again. I stared at it. I memorized it. I remembered who had paid every brick of that house, who had scrubbed the floors with her own hands, who had prayed over that home for safety, for love, for a future. And then I said aloud, for the first time in weeks, "He doesn't get to take this from me." Clara helped me contact a legal aid organization that worked with elder abuse cases. We explained everything: the forced institutionalization, the lack of consent, the house deed. They listened. They didn't just see an old woman. They saw a woman wronged. It took weeks. Papers, signatures, verifications. But step by step, I began to reclaim what was mine. The final straw came when I saw a photo on social media. Someone had sent it to Clara. My son, standing in front of the house, laughing, holding a "for rent" sign. That smile, that carelessness. It wasn't just disrespect. It was erasure. He had erased me. But he forgot one thing. You can't erase someone who still remembers who she is. That night I decided I would sell the house, legally, properly, quietly. Not for revenge, for justice. And maybe a little revenge too. The hardest part wasn't discovering that I had been discarded like an unwanted object. It was realizing how easily I had believed it. For weeks, I had walked the hallways of that place like a ghost, silent, obedient, waiting for someone to rescue me, waiting for a sign that I still mattered. And I think that's what broke me most. I stopped believing I had power, that I had a voice, but something shifted the day I saw Clara helping. Another elderly woman write a letter to her granddaughter. Her hands were slow. Her memory was fading. But the moment the pen touched the paper, she lit up. She became someone again. She became heard. That night, I lay in bed and whispered to myself, "You are not done. Not yet." The next morning, I asked Clara to help me get dressed properly. Not the usual sweater and slippers. I wanted my blue blouse, the one I kept folded in the drawer like a memory. I brushed my hair. I put on lipstick. A shaky hand, yes, but determined. When I looked in the mirror, something stirred. Not beauty, not youth, but presence. I had a meeting to attend. With Clara's help, I visited the community legal center. I told my story from beginning to end. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I had already cried enough. My voice trembled at first, but I spoke every word. I showed them the documents, the deed, the letters. I explained how I had been removed from my home without any legal process, how my son had treated me like a possession, not a person. They listened. They nodded. And then they asked something I hadn't expected. "What do you want to do, Anna?" I was quiet for a long time. What did I want? I didn't want to go back to that house. Not really. Too many ghosts there now. Too many memories with fingerprints I no longer trusted. I didn't want revenge. Not the kind that poisons the soul. I didn't want to fight for affection that no longer existed. I wanted peace. I wanted freedom. I wanted dignity. And I wanted him to feel, just once, what it was like to be left behind. "I want to sell the house," I said. "I want to start over." They nodded again. "Then that's what we'll do." In the weeks that followed, I became someone else. Not someone new, but someone I had buried long ago. I read documents. I made decisions. I signed papers with a steady hand. Clara drove me to meetings. She never treated me like I was frail. She treated me like I was a woman with purpose. One day, she looked at me and said, "I wish my grandmother had fought like you." I smiled gently. Maybe she fought in silence. The day the sale was finalized, I sat alone in a quiet office. The new owner was kind, a young couple. They said they would keep the garden. That made me cry. Not loudly, just enough. Enough to remember that even when something ends, it can still carry love forward. As I signed the final paper, I felt a strange release, like I was closing a book that had hurt me for too long. And somewhere, in another part of the city, my son was about to discover that the house he thought he could use, sell, or rent as he pleased was gone, sold, by the woman he tried to erase. The silence after the sale was not empty. It was sacred. I didn't call my son to tell him. I didn't owe him that. He had made his choices. So now I was making mine. Clara helped me pack a few belongings from the room I had occupied in the care home. My shawl, my photographs, a box, with recipes I hadn't touched in years. She smiled as she handed me the envelope with the check. "You're free now, Dona Anna," she said. "Whatever you want to do next, it's yours." I moved to a small apartment by the sea. Not luxurious, not large, but it was mine. There were geraniums on the balcony. The morning sun kissed the tiles, and for the first time in years, I felt the rhythm of my own breath returning. No one knocking at the door with instructions. No one telling me where I could or couldn't live. I slept with the window open, listening to the sound of waves instead of moans in the hallway. And I didn't feel guilt. Not anymore. But peace is not passive. It doesn't mean forgetting everything. It means remembering the right things and doing something with them. I kept thinking about the other women I had left behind in the care home, the ones who waited for letters that never came, the ones who cried in silence at night, hugging pictures of children who never returned. I remembered Dona Lucia, who clutched a broken music box like it was a piece of her soul. I remembered the way Clara used to walk down the halls with her cart, giving out medicine and gentle touches, holding entire lives between pill bottles and warm words. I couldn't forget them. So I didn't. I took part of the money and made a decision, quiet, calculated, generous in the way only someone who truly knows pain can be. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want applause. I wanted change. I returned to the care home unannounced one afternoon. Clara's eyes lit up when she saw me. "You look alive," she whispered. I laughed. I hadn't laughed like that in a long time. We sat in the small garden. I gave her the folder. sealed, legal, official. It's for them, I said. Not for the place, not for the system, for the people. She opened it slowly. A private donation fund. Monthly support for residents with no family. Money to restore dignity. New clothes, better meals, small field trips to parks, visits to museums. Things that said, "You still matter." Clara started crying. Not loud. Just that kind of cry you cry when the world surprises you with something beautiful. "I don't want them to know it was me," I added. "Just make sure they feel seen." She nodded, holding my hand like I was her own grandmother. Later that night, back in my apartment, I made tea and sat by the window. And I thought of him. My son. I imagined him arriving at the house one morning, keys in hand, ready to open a door that no longer belonged to him. I pictured the confusion, the anger, the realization. Maybe he called me. Maybe he left messages. I wouldn't know. I had changed my number. He took away my home without my permission. I gave away the future he counted on, without asking him, and I didn't do it out of hate. I did it because I finally loved myself enough. I had lived too long thinking that motherhood meant self-erasure, that to love him, I had to disappear. But I learned, too late. Perhaps that real love is not servitude, that respect must be mutual, that no one, not even your child, has the right to steal your voice. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a woman who had lost everything and still stood back up, who had been betrayed and still chose to heal, who had been silenced and found a way to speak through action. And I know some will judge me. They'll say I was cruel, that I should have forgiven him, that a mother should always welcome her son back. But I say this: mother should be loved back. A mother should not die waiting on a doorstep that was once hers. A mother who survives abandonment deserves more than pity. She deserves justice. And in my quiet way, I got mine. Mornings became sacred in my new life. I'd wake up with no alarm, stretch my arms, and open the window to let the breeze touch my skin like a blessing. The sunlight didn't hurt anymore. It felt like it belonged to me again. I made my own coffee. Strong. Just the way I used to like before I started adjusting everything to please others. There were no loud voices, no schedules dictated by strangers, no reminders that I was old and needed supervision, only silence. And in that silence, I met someone I had forgotten, myself. I began writing again, letters I never sent, thoughts I had buried, memories I had locked away. I wrote to the little girl I once was, to the woman I became, and to the mother who gave too much. I wrote to the silence that once scared me, and to the peace I had finally earned. Then one day, Clara sent a package. Inside, I found a bundle of handwritten notes, thank you letters from the residents at the care home. Some signed with shaky names, others anonymous. One said, "We don't know who you are, but we feel seen. We feel human again." I held that note against my chest like a relic. I smiled, not out of pride, but out of quiet joy. I hadn't just escaped abandonment. I had turned it into a force for dignity. Not just mine, but for others who were still inside that place, waiting for someone to say, "You are not forgotten." I never told anyone what I did to my son. I never explained. Let people think what they want. Some wounds are too deep to be displayed. Some justice doesn't need applause. He tried to contact me eventually. I heard through someone that he came back to the house and found strangers living there. He was furious. He called me selfish. But I didn't answer. I didn't scream. I didn't try to explain what should have been obvious. I just whispered to myself, he had my heart. Now he'll learn what it feels like to live without it. Sometimes late at night, I sit on my balcony with a blanket over my legs and watch the stars blink like tiny prayers. I'm not waiting anymore. Not for a call. Not for a knock on the door. Not for anyone to tell me I mattered. I already know. I speak to God now in whispers, not desperation. Not asking for anything, just saying thank you. For Clara, for the strength that came when I thought I had none left, for the pain that became my rebirth, for the silence that no longer punishes me, but protects me. Do I miss him? Sometimes? But I miss the boy I raised, not the man he became. And that's the grief no one talks about. The grief of mourning someone who's still alive. The grief of giving birth to someone who later pretends you never existed. But I exist. And more than that, I resist. I am the proof that even a woman who was discarded, silenced, humiliated, can stand back up, can take her pain and build something sacred from it, can turn abandonment into dignity, can turn betrayal into clarity. He lost a house. He lost a mother. But I found my voice. I found peace. And I gave that peace to others. That is the justice life gave me. And tonight, I'll sleep again with the window open, breathing the air of a woman who is finally free. He lost the home he took for granted. I found the soul he tried to erase.